guys fire away.
Let's just start with your overall impressions. A couple weeks into free agency, how do you think the start of the offseason's gone so far?
Yeah, I've been really, really happy with the way it's gone for us. Kwesi's done a great job, and Rob Brzezinski kind of putting it all together. I know we've talked a lot about how kind of all the pieces fit together, but for us and really, from the first day I came in and started evaluating the roster, I felt really, really good about a lot of pieces that were already in place. So to be able to be real, we put a lot of work into the players we've signed as far as studying them, how they'll fit with the schemes that we'll run, and how they'll fit alongside their teammates. And whether it's Za'Darius, Harrison, Jordan, Johnny Munt, Austin Schlottman, all those guys so far, and even up until the recent guys we brought in kind of as this second wave has started. Everybody's here with a purpose to compete and be a part of, the big plan that we put together, and I think it's gone great so far. I give Kwesi and the rest of his staff, and like I said, Rob, a ton of credit for getting a lot done here early on. Yep. Well, first and foremost, his future is very bright. I was not surprised at all to see. I had kind of interviewed before he got his recent promotion to assistant GM, and just going through that process with those guys, and George ran a really great process, but Darren was a big-time part of it, and you could see as experienced, as successful as George Payton has been in this league, he's going to rely on Darren a lot, and I think he's probably said as such himself, but I've known Darren a long time, had so much respect for him as a player. He made me a better player competing right alongside with him, and seeing him in his role in this league now has been really cool, because you see a guy that is probably going to be running his own team one day, and I look forward to that day when that happens. Yeah.
If I can ask you a little bit more, you talked about the roster. One of the things that I'm really curious about is the roster really hasn't changed a whole lot in the last couple of years. The core is pretty much the same. But the roster didn't get to the playoffs the last couple of years. It seems like you're kind of banking on your coaching and your scheme to kind of elevate things and progress. It seems like a tough task, but how do you look at that?
Yeah, I don't really look at it like that, to be honest with you. I kind of look at it, came in with a kind of an independent eye on. Obviously, I studied this roster a lot before even arriving here, but then you come in and you actually see, you see this game comes down to little things and little details sometimes, execution by some of the players you're talking about, no question, but I'm excited about trying to give these guys an opportunity on, in really all three phases, to go out and feel really good about what we're doing schematically and kind of put it together piece by piece here this spring. We'll get these guys in the next couple weeks here, which will make it start to feel real. But there's no question that I feel really good about the pieces that were in place. But although sometimes things may not jump out as changing the roster, we've made some additions that I think will have a big-time impact on really all three phases. And then, like I said, I think some of those players that you speak of that have really been here and we're relying on, I'm excited about getting the opportunity for me personally to get to work with those guys here very soon.
Kevin Kwesi, you talked last week about winning on the margins.
Yep.
What does that phrase mean to you as a coach? Like, where are some of the areas where you feel like that's...
You got to be real quick. You got to be real careful having me. Half the time he says that he's so much smarter than I am that.
Ask you to translate for the rest of us.
There you go. Well, I think what that means, is the small victories here and there, and we're set on a course of, we're in complete alignment at all times, and that may sound crazy to people, but you talk to folks around here, you talk to some of the other coaches that I've been able to spend some time with this week, and the first thing they say is, man, like you and Kwesi seem really dialed in. You and Kwesi seem, if I see one of you guys, the other's right next to the other. There's very few times where we're not, really enjoying spending time around each other. Events like this are no different than when we're in the office, except, we're a little bit better dressed and we get to talk to you guys in front of microphones. But it is a real thing. We're in alignment, and winning on those margins to me really just means we're being really, really smart about what we do. That collaboration that does exist allows us to make those small, really important decisions while not veering off the greater path that we've kind of decided is the best foot forward for us for 2022. I think I think it could be a little bit of both, but I'd like to say the in-game things, we're a long way out from there, but it's going to be a process of, we've got some great people, great coaches on our staff. We've got some great situational experience on our staff that all rely on as a young head coach, especially as the play caller. Wanting to be involved in all three phases is one thing, but when you're actually calling plays, I've learned from some of the best in our league that have been able to do it, that you have to have a coaching staff you can rely on, and that's not just on a Sunday process. That's a Monday through Saturday leading up to game day, and relying on everybody we have in the building that could be a resource for that.
What is kind of your philosophy or approach to the game management fourth down?
Yeah.
To like the game management coordinator on staff?
Yeah.
Just kind of explain how you're going to coach that for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important to use the data and the analytics as a tool, especially, like I said, as the head coach that gets the luxury of calling plays, and I do use that as that is a real term of the luxury of calling plays, because you can control a lot, maybe that you wouldn't be able to do if you weren't calling those plays. As far as when you are on offense, managing the clock and the situation of down and distance is one thing, but actually the play you call and the results and understanding the risk reward of that particular play in that situation, whether it is a fourth down, red zone, trying to manipulate the clock in some capacity. I say that because the analytics and the data will drive a lot of that, but then the in-game specifics of that day, weather, who's the quarterback on the other side, how have we played offensively, how's our defense playing, how's our team, what's our team's mindset, going into that situation to best give us our best chance to win a football game, because one Sunday might not mirror the next, and I think that's important. But as far as how we'll practice those situations, how we'll prepare for those situations, you let the data and the analytics kind of drive the initial path, and then you let your gut instinct and feel and those coaches with that experience around you to help drive that towards the finish line.
The game management coordinator, Ryan Cordell,
Yep.
how did that, how did you kind of come up with it? Is it a bit more of your title, and kind of what is responsibility?
Yeah, I was around Ryan for the first time in San Francisco, actually when I was around Kwesi as well. And just remember early on he was doing some things for our staff there that jumped out at me. And knowing he's basically done that role for Kevin Stefanski the last couple years, Kwesi obviously had a ton of experience with him in that building. And I'll tell you what, just jumped out at me from interviewing him and being around him is he's prepared. He's going to be great anytime he gets to be in front or around our players, and we take a lot of pride. We call it situational masters. We take a lot of pride in it. It's something we'll talk about from some of the very first few team meetings that I'll do with the team even this spring. It's not something you could just do on Sunday, when the season rolls around. It's something you practice. It's something that your team's got to know is really important. And in the end, I think, if they can play with that quieted mind in those situations, it's on us to call the right plays and kind of manage them. But those guys are the ones in the huddle. Those guys are the ones that have to take that process to the game. And I've just seen it work at its best when those guys have complete ownership in those situations.
Kirk has talked about in past years that he relies on coaching to kind of give him structure for how aggressive he should be.
Yep.
Either in a particular time or just in general. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, knowing that and having worked with him, how you kind of try to, what mindset you try to install in him, if that's the right way to put it, to get him where you want him to be and not beyond or below.
Yeah, the first thing is I think you rely on a guy's ability to see the field. Kirk's played a lot of football, and with that comes the experience level of understanding exactly what those razor-thin margin of errors really look like. So when we call certain plays, then it's how you present them, it's how you install them, it's how you talk about, as a quarterback, this is how visually I want you to see the play within the rhythm and timing of the play. Those two things are what I think Kirk means sometimes when he talks about he's been coached to you kind of manage decision making through plays. That's what that means, because a lot of times either from the all 22, I know I've been guilty of it plenty, holding the clicker in my hands the next day asking why. But you got to look at it through the lens of that quarterback, and you got to look at it through the lens of not only that quarterback, what they're seeing, but what they're feeling within the pocket, what they're feeling, were they under pressure, were they needing to move their feet, slide off the spot. A lot of coach speak terms to say, realistically, what was the best possible outcome on this play? Did we coach it to see that outcome and the rhythm and timing of the play? And then ultimately, what was the ending result? But never the result first. Right. And that's that process over results that we talk about. And playing quarterback in this league, you talk to Tom Brady, you talk to Peyton Manning, you talk to Drew Brees over the years, those guys will tell you that maybe sometimes the best result that comes from a play is checking the football down. Maybe the best result is throwing the ball away, not taking a sack in the red zone. But all those situations, more so than just who's open, when they're open, all those situations play into the best quarterbacks in this league. That's processing, and they do it really well each and every snap. And that's what we'll start working with Kirk on here in a couple weeks from day one. I know he's excited about it.
And his desire for that structure, in your experience with veteran quarterbacks, is that common, or is he?
Oh yeah, no, because otherwise, if they're in the absence of structure, it's like when we talk about in the absence of communication. You know that some negativity can seep in. In the absence of structure, a lot of questioning can sneak in, and that's our job ahead of time. If you're running a lot of plays where you don't definitively know this is what we want to happen, that leaves too much gray area, in my opinion. That's what we spend all our time on. I mean, throughout the week, we get a lot of credit for the hours that we work. Hopefully, we're spending some of those hours clearly defining a plan of attack for not only Kirk and our quarterback, but our entire offense, for Justin and Adam and KJ and Irv, how they run routes, for Dalvin, how we want him to see the progression on holes as far as when we're running a play. Hey, here's exactly what we want you looking at, and then here's where you're going from there once the defense does this. And then ultimately not overcoaching these guys so that you walk that fine line of letting your playmakers play, but also giving that clear identity from a coach and that conviction of how you want it to look.
The last thing.
Come back to you. No, you're good. Yeah. No, I don't pinch I know how it happened. I do know how it happened based upon the coverage and the situation of the game. I don't know if you were here a couple seconds ago, but we were just talking a little bit about situational football. And for our guys, the one thing, it's one thing, like I said, for Cooper to get open in that moment. It's one thing for Matthew to find him with the pressure that was kind of in his face. But we had talked a lot about those moments, and leading up to that was the play before, where Cooper catches a corner route down the field, kind of wins versus one-on-one coverage with a safety over the top, and still has the wherewithal to catch it, get north and south, and end up getting out of bounds to blow the clock dead, which allowed us the opportunity to kind of mimic like we were getting in the huddle, but then go to the ball no huddle to try to get the defense kind of caught in between calls, caught in between a running an all-out pressure. So when they did that, Cooper was able to take the middle of the field. Matthew was aware of it, and then obviously you see Cooper screaming down the field. But then it's on those guys to pitch and catch, and at that moment, with the stakes never having been greater for us as far as our season goes, for those guys to effortlessly and flawlessly complete that pass, I give those guys a ton of credit. But I guess I just reflected on that moment right there, so appreciate you asking about that.
Because you mentioned Irv Smith, and I was curious, what reports have you gotten?
Yeah.
Are you expecting full go, or does he still have some way to go yet?
Yeah, we're going to be smart with Irv. There's no reason why he can't hit the ground running from a mental perspective this spring. I know Coach Angelico and myself and Coach Wes Phillips, we've all been in contact with Irv. He's so excited to get going. I think he feels really good. He's been getting some great work in down in New Orleans, and we'll get him up to our facility here in the next couple weeks. He's been up for some medical checks, and everything looks great. I know he feels good, and now it's just a matter of understanding that April 11th doesn't necessarily mean we got to be full go. We'll have a couple good weeks in the classroom with these guys before we get out on the field. We'll see where he's at, and then we'll be smart about it, relying on Tyler Williams and Josh and Uriah there and our kind of medical performance team to kind of paint the picture of what it's going to look like this spring for Irv. But I'm really excited about getting him going.
You signed a couple players yesterday, including an offensive lineman with a lot of starting experience.
Yep.
How do you feel about the way the offensive line is shaping up?
Yeah, I think you feel good about the starting point because of your tackles always. I think those guys, the more and more I've been able to study our group up front, I think Brian I think Brian's one of the best right tackles in football. I really do. And then I think we have a young left tackle in Christian that there is so much to love about his game, his skill set, his physicalness, his size, all the things that made him a high pick for a lot of people to consider coming out of the draft. That's all there, and then I'm just excited to get our hands on him and start coaching him up on a daily basis, so he knows just exactly where his ceiling is, because it's way up there. So that makes you feel great about it. I think Ezra is going to have a great offseason and continue his progression. I think you see such a great skill set from his feet to his hand placement to his power in his hands. The guy's got a lot in his body, and then obviously with Garrett, there was a lot to love about Garrett coming out a few years ago. I watched a ton of his tape coming out, and schematically what we do may be a little bit different overall from what kind of has been done here, that I think could maybe put some tools in his toolbox to have some success consistently, snap in and snap out. And then we're going to have a nice competition at that right guard spot. I don't think we're completely done adding pieces to our offensive line. I know Kwesi loves building through the draft there as well, but Jesse gives us a veteran presence there to go along with some guys that got snaps there last year. Udo is one of those guys that I think we really want to find a spot for him, that whether it is at that swing tackle spot or we're going to have him compete at guard. I think those guys will get snaps. There's plenty of time to kind of figure that spot out, but there's a lot of coaches in this room right now that are talking about 2 or 3 or 4 spots on their offensive line coming together. It feels really good to know that we're going to have some real healthy competition there, but we also feel really good about some of those foundational points that we have. I think, first of all, the production on tape, he affects the game in the run and pass game, but then you see a fit next to Dalvin Tomlinson, and then the edge players that we're going to have with Daniil and Sedarius and obviously DJ, who's mixing in there, and we're excited about as well. But Harrison's impacted the game. He's played consistently at a high level, really well coached in that defense there in Buffalo. But then you see some of the off-the-field stuff, and you realize, when you start talking about the type of guy we want, who we want to, what it means to be a Viking on our football team, he fits all those molds. He checks all those boxes, and I definitely think our community, all of Minnesota will feel him and his presence in the community. And then our teammates in the locker room, he sets the standard. He's going to be one of those guys, along with a lot of our other leadership and really up-and-coming younger players that can really help set the tone for the message and the core beliefs we want to have in our team. Yep. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it's to be determined, the group in its entirety. But we did add a couple veteran guys that have some experience, both as nickels, but also outside as well. In Nate Hairston, and obviously Shandon's a guy that has been in the division. The guys in-house know him well, but we also have some coaches that know him really well, and in Mike Pettin and Mike Smith that have been around him. What we wanted to do is we wanted to add football players, guys with cover skill sets, but can tackle, play in multiple spots, and really our defense is going to be about finding those pieces that fit, and then how does all 11 really play off one another. That's from similar schemes, whether it would be in 2020 with Brandon Staley running our defense, or even last year with Raheem. The one thing that always jumped out with our scheme that we're looking to really, in our own way, put in place is guys making an impact at different moments based upon that week-to-week approach to the game plan. And you need guys with different skill sets to be able to do that. So as we add those pieces, it may seem like, oh, how does that fit? How does this guy fit? We've got a plan in place to allow guys to compete at a really high level, and we'll find the best 11. And that may change week in and week out. We may have packages based upon the teams we're playing, what type of weapons they have on the other side of the ball, and I think that's okay. And I think that's how the best defenses in our league are playing nowadays. Oh, shoot. Yeah, I mean, I have so many mentors in this league, and mentors can come in like a Sean McVay, who's right next to me, who are guys you worked for or worked with, but also just the respect on the other sideline of we watch a lot of each other's tape, and we, the intent of a lot of plays when you see it, and you sit there and you say to yourself, man, that's a good idea. I'm going to copy that right then and there, and then you kind of watch around the league, and maybe you see one of your ideas sprout up, and you're like, holy cow, that's a really good football coach and a really good team that might have just used one of our things that our coaching staff came up with. But I'll just tell you, to be around the 31 other head coaches, it really set in this week for me. Whether it's sitting next to Coach Belichick in the larger sessions, or maybe just seeing some of these other coaches that have had so much success coming up and telling you congrats here, or wishing the best for you, as long as you're not playing us, those types of things. That carries a lot of weight, because I just got a lot of respect for those guys, especially those guys you mentioned.
Every organization does it a little bit different. When it comes to the draft, how much say your vision and coaching staff have against, say, like, I don't think this guy fits this game, or this guy definitely does. How do you go about it?
I think that's the most important part of our jobs when it comes to free agency and the draft. That's that collaboration word that I know I've used a ton, but that's really what that is. I'm not smart enough to use some of the phrases that Kwesi uses when he starts talking about our process, but I can tell you what it involves is him and I sitting next to each other a lot, and then putting pressure on our individual staffs to do our roles in the process, which to me is finding, collectively coming together as a staff and saying, hey, this is exactly how this player will fit, maybe initially, and then here's where we see him fitting down the road. Because I think it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be an exact fit right away, as long as we know we're going to coach this guy up and he'll be the best possible version of himself when he reaches that highest potential in this role. But maybe he can help us right now in a role, amongst some of his teammates fitting in on offense, defense, or the kicking game. And that's really our jobs, is to find the initial role, coach him up every single day with the eye on the ultimate goal of where that player fits within our program.
Kevin, during your playing career, how important was it, or unimportant was it, to have a coach that played at this level?
I've talked a lot over the past 6, 7, 8 years to the quarterbacks I've coached that I do think it helps, because sometimes you're asking them to do some really difficult things, and you could preface it with, hey guys, I understand what I'm asking you is really difficult to do, but I also understand we need you to do it to help us win. And normally with the guys that I've been around, Kirk included, when you lay things out for them like that, these guys are locked in and they're ready to take on the challenge and attack it. And I really see that mirrored over the last 2-3 years as an offensive coordinator, really being able to stand up in front of the unit and kind of mirror that messaging just on a larger scale, how we're going to go about moving the football, how we're going to go about score points. So now I just see it continuing to take that step forward and talking to our whole team, what it's going to take to win games. How do we see ourselves each and every Sunday, not reinventing ourselves from a core philosophy standpoint, but reinventing ourselves possibly schematically and what it's going to take to best win that particular football game, then resetting it each and every week, and me standing out in front of our team delivering that message is what I'm looking forward to the most. And then dealing with the process and the highs and lows that come with it, inevitably the adversity that'll hit. I like to think that I take a lot of pride in leading from out in front when some of that adversity hits, and relying on our leadership and the ownership the players will have to kind of be right there with me.
With that said, though, when you're evaluating quarterbacks throughout the years, how much do you reflect on your playing career when you watch the tape and have these interviews and everything?
That's a great question, because I do it a lot. Because it's one thing for me to talk about knowing how difficult things are, but it's also another thing for me to know the baseline level of confidence that you need to play this position. And how do you get that confidence? Two things, really. Natural ability to do the hard things, natural ability to be accurate, have enough pace to the football to be able to fit it into tight windows, understanding kind of how to change up the arm talent type throws that it takes to throw in this league. So the physical ability, and then understand what it's like to see it. And then when you go coach a guy that you've evaluated either through the draft or in free agency, you kind of see a baseline level of where that guy's at, but then you also know, can I challenge this player to be a better player, knowing if he looks at it like this, or we do maybe clean up some progressions and we don't ask him to see a lot, which will basically essentially to equal him seeing very little. Can we clean it up to the point of, that's coaching in my opinion, can we clean up the process for the player so that with their baseline level of talent and ability, they can be at their best possible version of themselves when it matters the most.
You talked about
Appreciate it.
how much much time you're going to spend in nickels. Maybe it doesn't change that many things.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot more, but when he gets in base,
Yeah.
how much would it have changed, or how much have you guys got a chance to assess if you can drop into coverage, especially
Yeah. Yeah, he did it. There was enough snaps, over the past couple years, either in games and practice. He did it either on fire zones or different coverages that they had. So I've seen it. I think he's got such a baseline level of athletic ability that as long as you're teaching landmarks and the intent behind dropping into coverage, are we going to have him, covering Cooper Kupp in the slot? Probably not. And if we do, that's more so a question for you to ask me over Daniil. But I think that guys like that, with his length, his athletic ability, it's almost as much about taking up space, in the second level of the defense as it is, matching people in coverage. But then that role in base is really cool now because we can kind of free him up sometimes from those interior combinations, where, keeping those tackles from getting their hands on him, try to match him up more against tight ends on the perimeter, setting those edges with him and Za'Darius, and then that's why you have guys like Dalvin. That's why you have guys like Harrison Phillips that can then get off blocks inside. But most importantly, if all four of those guys are eating up blocks, guess what? Jordan Hicks and Eric Kendricks are running sideline to sideline, making a lot of plays, which you can tell I'm excited about.
From everything you've heard with Daniil, he's more looking forward to kind of that new role of not necessarily having his hand in the dirt every play.
Yeah, I think so because, on those early downs, by being efficient defensively on those early downs and all 11 playing together, stopping the run, knocking out the run on the way to the quarterback, guess what? Then we get into those third down situations, and that's why we've got Ed Donatel, Mike Pettin, Mike Smith, Chris Rumpf. These guys have been in places where, we don't have to just always line up with our hand in the ground at the defensive end spots, rushing the passer on a straight line. That's where scheme comes into play. We can move these guys. They're movable pieces that both Daniil and Za'Darius, the one cool thing when you really study them over their careers is go look at how many times those guys have been walking around on a third down and hitting 4 or 5 different gaps in a game, rushing different matchups. Look at how many times they've been on the same side with another rusher. So we can dictate the terms of slides. That's the one thing as an offensive coach. I can look at protections and see, exactly how to manipulate the turn of the center so we can get one-on-one matchups with whoever we want, whenever we want. That's why, that's what keeps me up at night as an offensive coach. But maybe that week I'll walk down the hall and be a defensive coach for that week. I'll leave it to Wes and the guys to go figure out how to block all those guys, and I'll go figure out how to get the other team's quarterback on the ground. That's the good part about being the head coach now is you can, be in different rooms when you want and nobody can say anything to you. Yep. I think field position plays a role in it, obviously. But who's the guy on the other side? Who's the play caller on the other side? Who's the quarterback? What's our defense playing like? Is it a day where we force 2 or 3 turnovers and we're really on a bonus possession anyway? And then ultimately, I look at it as I talked a little earlier about the idea of that's where the luxury of being the play caller comes into play, because not only do I know I want to go for it, I know exactly what I want to call, and I know what we've repped that play for. Your chances of going up in the success factor come into play when you can kind of dictate the terms a little bit. I not only want to go for it, but I want to go no huddle to go for it. I not only want to go for it, but I want to use one of our tools for cadence or breaking the huddle quickly and getting a line quickly, maybe a shift, a motion. All those tools that we have, I know how to implement those while also making the decision to go for it, where maybe we can just, I have a saying I've been using with our coaches, never fight a fair fight. The fourth down's a great time not to fight a fair fight if it's possible to tilt the winning edge in our factor however we can. Yeah. I just with our clock and the way our rules work of kind of our ability to sometimes manipulate the end of quarters, second quarter into the third quarter. Hey, we deferred to start the game, and all of a sudden, hey, look at us. We've got the ball to finish the second quarter. Maybe let's be conservative, knowing that we don't have to give the ball back to those guys till maybe the middle of the third quarter. When you're playing Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or these quarterbacks, it helps to keep them on the bench and not on the field, going downfield against your defense. So a lot of times with that becomes the decision making on third down, fourth down in that kind of fringe field goal range. Maybe we can pin these guys deeper. Hey, maybe it's better off. The risk reward here of keeping that other offense off the field is so great in our favor. Let's go for it, take on a little bit more risk, but we get this first down. We get to dictate the next third of this football game just by getting this one play. So it's a great question, and I think that's where each and every situation is its own.
I'll say time for 2 more.
He loves saying that, by the way.
15 years.
Yeah, it's great. I do enjoy it.
You guys were signing Darius Smith when that became an option. What made him stick out?
Yeah.
Obviously, the relationship you guys are sure helped that, but how big a priority was it to get an edge rusher and how much did he stick out?
Well, first and foremost, I did not know him before we brought him in, but I heard him long before I saw him come into my office. I mean, the amount of energy and juice this guy had, the excitement to be a Minnesota Viking was, it was infectious. You can talk to people around the building that day. We kept him in the building 2 days because we were trying to get the deal done. But from that standpoint, could not be more excited to have him. But then have played against him a lot, have game planned against him a lot. What gives me the most excitement is just his versatility, his ability to line up in a lot of spots, both knocking out the run, but also he rushes the quarterback and has a repertoire of moves from the edge, internally, as part of a pressure package with other players. He's a guy that doesn't need to just work on his own to get to the quarterback. All that being said, it leads me to tell you that we're excited about how we're going to deploy him with Daniil, with Dalvin, with Harrison, with the rest of our outfit to be in attack mode on defense when it comes to those known passing situations. And I'm really excited about that. And I think everything that he brings from his experience leveled in big games to the juice factor and setting the tone of what we want our culture to be like. A lot to be excited about with Z. Oh, I do. Well, one of which I got to walk out on the field pregame and see Matthew Stafford throwing a football, and he said that's what first overall picks are supposed to look like. We weren't together long, but it was funny kind of eventually coming full circle to coach him. Was awesome, and now he's one of the closest people in the league to me, and I got so much respect having accomplished that ultimate goal side by side with him. But the other would be, people don't remember it, but when you wear number 19 as a quarterback in a preseason game, people aren't really looking for a lot of production out of that position, and rightly so. No shots at the great Johnny Unitas or anybody. But I will say, handing off the ball and watching it go for a 75-yard touchdown in one of my first couple plays, I don't know, I don't think quarterback rating, factors in with the efficiency of a handoff, but I couldn't have done it better. Unfortunately, they did trade me the next day, so I don't think I had the impact that I wanted to. But it's funny, I saw Martin Mayhew, who was the GM at the time in Detroit. He was here, saw him last night with my wife, and he was explaining to her, this is why we had to do that. We traded. We had a great plan for it. And my wife's like, oh, we weren't married at the time. I didn't care. They claimed me to trade me because a few teams had put in a claim on me, but no, that's just one of the small things. You walk in the halls and you see a GM that traded you one day and allowed me to go on my football journey to get me to where I am. So I guess I should go thank him. That's exactly right. Yeah.